Introducing Scott Ritter's YouTube channel, a platform dedicated to discussing the Russian-Ukrainian conflict. Scott Ritter, an expert in international relations, provides in-depth analysis and commentary on the ongoing war between Russia and Ukraine. With his extensive knowledge and first-hand experience, Scott Ritter offers unique insights into the historical background, geopolitical complexities, and humanitarian aspects of the conflict. Join his channel to gain a comprehensive understanding of the crisis, including its impact on regional stability and global politics. Through well-researched and balanced content, Scott Ritter's YouTube channel serves as a valuable resource for anyone interested in delving deeper into the Russian-Ukrainian war.
Scott, is it more likely that the counteroffensive will be used as an excuse to find an off-ramp or for escalation?
Well, I mean, again, this is along the lines of what Alexander and I were talking about. If there was political maturity in the West, the counteroffensive could be used to find an off-ramp. It would provide a perfect opportunity to get an off-ramp. But I don't think the West, none of the rhetoric coming out of the West suggests they're looking for an off-ramp. But what we hear is escalation, escalation. The United States is talking about F-16s, ATACMS, cluster munitions. This is all, very escalation oriented. So I unfortunately think it's moving towards escalation.
Law of Attraction wants to know what surprised you during your trip to Russia?
Economic health. I mean, I like Alexander. I'm not an economist, so Alexander had a more solid thing. But I think we're both on a similar page where we were optimistic that the Russians would be able to overcome the sanctions. What surprised me is that they've overcome the sanctions. Not would be able to. They've done it. And Alexander said something that was very that I picked up on as well. It's not that the Russian economy is strong. I believe the Russian economy is the strongest it's ever been. It's never been this strong. It's healthier. That the West, through their sanctions policy, has allowed Russia to clean up a lot of problems. There's still a lot of problems left to be cleaned up. You don't overcome all these things overnight. But the Russian economy is stronger. And the longer we continue to seek to destroy it through sanctions, the stronger it's going to get. And then the other thing was, and this is where we get a little quasi-emotional, and I don't want people to think that I've suddenly become kumbaya and then I hold hands and I, do yoga chants. But people have talked about the Russian soul, and and I studied Russian history, I studied Russian culture and all that. But I always thought that the Russian soul was sort of this, made up thing. Tolstoy talked about it, Dostoevsky talked about it, Pushkin talked about it, but it's theoretical that when you get down to the nuts and bolts every day, there ain't no Russian soul. It's just a bunch of Russian people doing what Russian people do. That doesn't mean it's bad. I'm just saying, that they're more material like we are. They're like, ladies and gentlemen, let me just wake you up to the fact that there is a Russian soul. It's real and it defines Russia. It's part of every Russian I met. They don't know how to define it themselves. You get different definitions, but it's there. And the linkage between the Russian people and Mother Russia goes through the soul. And if you don't understand that, then you won't be able to come up with policies that responsibly address Russia, both positive and negative. The Russian soul is real. It's visceral. It's there. And that surprised me because I didn't expect it.
Right. Christian wants to know what your thoughts are on U.S. or Poland entering Ukraine. You expressed doubt in a live stream with Ask the Inspector, and this differs a bit from Alexander and my interpretation of things. What are your thoughts, Scott?
Well, first of all, I think Poland has oversold its relevance to the world. It saw how quickly Ukraine became a center of gravity for the U.S. without understanding the extent to which we were sacrificing Ukraine. We've never helped Ukraine to sustain or save Ukraine. We've always sacrificed Ukraine. Ukraine has never been something that we're willing to sacrifice everything to allow it to live. We've been willing to allow Ukraine to die to further our interests. And Poland misunderstood that. And Poland now seeks to become the center of gravity of Europe and use the United States to make it so. And what I would tell the Polish people, and this is what I said, is we're not there for you, Poland. We're not going to die for Poland. That we will sacrifice Poland just like we've sacrificed everybody else. The Poles should not overplay this card. And the other thing the Poles need to understand is that they're not well loved in Europe. It's not like the Germans are willing to bend over backwards to help Poland. France won't bend over back. This isn't the way it works, Poland. The only thing that gives you relevance is America's willingness to view you as a frontline state against Russia. But understand that when America is confronted with geopolitical realities that require a recalibration of our relationship with Europe, Poland will not be the center of gravity around which we rotate. You will go down the toilet of life, just like Ukraine went down the toilet of life, just like the Baltic states will go down the toilet of life. We will gravitate to that which promotes our values, our national security, and the best interest in Poland isn't it. And that's what I meant by that. The Poles are reading too much into Fifth Corps headquarters and a brigade headquarters, because all of that is reversible.
Right. Rick F. wants you to talk about MAD. Why do neocons feel MAD calculus has changed since the USSR? MAD is no longer deterrent, but destiny.
Well, mutually assured destruction is what MAD is, and it came about in the 1960s during the arms race, where we and the Soviets just started producing more and more missiles with greater capabilities, and a recognition that ballistic missile defense systems couldn't stop it. And if we tried to build defense systems to stop it, we'd quickly bankrupt ourselves. We couldn't afford this. So we adopted a strategy called mutually assured destruction, which basically said that we won't try to build these anti-ballistic missile systems. We're going to leave everything but our national command authority naked, so that if we go to war, it's a guarantee that you will destroy our country, and it's a guarantee we will destroy your country. Therefore, with that guarantee on the table, it's a deterrent. We will no longer want to use these nuclear weapons. And that became the foundation upon which not arms limitation, but arms reduction began. Because now that we acknowledge that mutually assured destruction is there, we begin to reduce the arms. We have brought the arms down from tens of thousands of weapons on each side down to 1,550 on each side. You can add that with some reserve systems that you brought up, but it's compared to what we had to what we have now, it's night and day. And as a result, our strategic thinkers, the other thing that happened is mutually assured destruction happened in a time when we feared the Soviets, and we viewed the Soviets as our strategic equals. The 1990s caused us to view the Russians as a defeated enemy and a paper tiger. We worked with the Russians to reduce their nuclear weapons, but we never respected the Russians. And sometime in the early 2000s, we had people that began to say, why are we spending so much money on nuclear weapons if we can't use them? We can't leverage this. And so we started talking about using our nuclear arsenal for a non-nuclear activity. So whereas, for instance, of weapons of mass destruction, one of the big things in 1991 was, what did James Baker tell Tariq Aziz when he said, hey, by the way, when we roll through you, which we're going to, if you use chemical weapons, what will happen? And the answer is, he pretty much said, we will nuke you. And I don't know, people should pull out the original top secret Desert Storm plan and see if they can find the nuclear annex, because there was one. We had nuclear weapons in theater, and there was a plan to use them. So, so now we're talking about using nuclear weapons in a non-nuclear environment. Now, people would say, well, that's justifiable. You deter it, and it worked. The Iraqis didn't use chemical weapons. Okay, but now we've taken it even further, where you have people now talking about, if you launch a cyber attack against the United States, we could use nuclear weapons to deter that. The one thing I know is that a cyber attack isn't going to destroy the entire world. It'll make life inconvenient. But a nuclear attack will destroy. Are we willing? Are we really saying that it's our policy to kill 30 million people because our life became inconvenient because of a cyber attack? And the answer is yes. During the Trump administration, when this policy gained even more credence, we understand that Barack Obama always said that I didn't like what George W. Bush did with this policy. But you had 8 years to reverse it, Barack Obama, and you didn't. In fact, you capitalized upon it by continuing to allow the development of weapons such as the W-76-2 low-yield nuclear weapon, which was developed during the Obama administration. It was fielded during the Trump administration. It is a weapon designed to be used against Russia. Indeed, the first time that it was tested from an operational planning standpoint was a war game where Mark Espers, the Secretary of Defense, actually initiated the command function to release the W-76-2 from an Ohio-class submarine on board a Trident submarine to strike a simulated Russian offensive against the Baltics. So it's a weapon designed to be used against Russia, which is insane. That's what it is. During the Trump administration, a deputy secretary of defense, whose name I can't remember, gave a speech where he said, the purpose of our doctrine is we want the Russians and the Chinese to wake up every morning not knowing whether or not America is going to nuke them. That's an actual quote from an American official in the Trump administration linked to this policy, which means we no longer fear mutually assured destruction because we've always viewed the Russians, for instance, as a weaker nation. But Vladimir Putin, who has, Alexander, you brought up speeches that you listened to. I mean, he gave a great speech, I think, in 2018, where he introduced new categories of weapons. And he talked about how we got there, the ABM treaty, the INF treaty. And he said, for years, we've said, listen to us. And you didn't listen to us. He said, are you listening now? As we deploy these systems. Russia right now has nuclear superiority over the United States. That doesn't mean that they can win a nuclear war because we have submarines. And our submarines, for the moment, give us a lethal retaliation capability. But the point is that our missile defense systems don't work against the Russians. The Russians have more strategic opportunities, and they can inflict a greater amount of damage on the United States than Russia can inflict, or than the United States can inflict on Russia. Which means we're right back to mutually assured destruction. The guarantee now, there was always thinking that there could be a limited nuclear war, that we could contain Russia by. We always accuse the Russians of things that we do. Escalation to de-escalate. You hear that in America. Oh, the Russian policy is to escalate, de-escalate. They're going to drop a nuke to create, the impression that they're willing to go all the way, and then we back down. But we're not going to do that. We're going to go one up. And Putin has said, we don't play that game. One nuclear weapon used against Russia, we use all our nuclear weapons, the world ends. We will be martyrs, meaning he says, all Russia will die. You're going to hell. Because you started it. And that's the Russian nuclear policy right there in a nutshell. Mutually assured destruction. It's a guarantee. If we use a single nuclear weapon against Russia, the world ends today. And the Americans haven't woken up to that reality. We still have people that believe that we can launch a preemptive strike against the Russians. The scary thing is you have Russian nuclear planners now, strategic planners, that are looking at the perceived and perhaps real Russian superiority with their systems now, in terms of precision, rapid strike, etc. They believe they can launch. Some people are saying Russia should be prepared to incorporate the notion of preemptive nuclear strike into their doctrine. And that becomes very dangerous because now if you have both sides forward leaning, one mistake, one miscalculation, one misjudgment, it's all over. That's the most dangerous. I want everybody listening to this program to understand that every day you have is a gift because we are one mistake away from all of this ending right now. The Bulletin of Atomic Scientists have that doomsday clock and they have it set to 90 seconds. That's crap. It's less than 0.001 second because all it takes is one mistake, one miscalculation, one error of judgment. And this all ends. Everything ends. It's all gone. And if you don't wake up every morning almost puking your guts out of fear, then you're doing it wrong, guys, which means you have to recalculate your approach to life. Stop thinking about how you're going to buy the next car, how you're going to buy the next thing. It's how you get the United States get back on the responsible disarmament track with the Russians, get arms control back in place. There is no arms control today. The New START treaty, it's there, but it's not there. It's expiring in 2026. And if there's not something replacing it, there is no arms control, which means this arms race goes out of control. We are all going to die. So yeah, this isn't just a game. This isn't something that, political scientists play, strategic theory and game theory and all that. This is your life. This is your life, and this is the life of your children, your grandchildren, and future generations, none of which will exist if we don't solve this problem now, right now, today.
Lynn wants to know your thoughts about the depleted uranium tank rounds to Ukraine, as reported by the Wall Street Journal.
Well, I've always given an oversimplified answer to this, which is when I was in the Marine Corps, I loved depleted uranium. Loved it. Loved it. Why? Greatest tank killer there is. We used depleted uranium in the first Gulf War. The LAV-25 was able to take its 25 millimeter Bush cannon and using depleted uranium rounds knock out Iraqi T-64, T-72 tanks. Tank killer. And when you're a Marine and you're in the Ford Division command post and you have an Iraqi brigade coming at you, and the only thing saving you from being overrun is an LAV-25 commanded by a captain named Eddie Ray, and Eddie Ray's LAV-25s come in and pop, take out the Iraqi tanks. You're going, God bless depleted uranium, best weapon ever made. I love it. And you do love it. I wasn't, by the way, in that command post, but that is a fact of that battle that happened. I could imagine that if I'm on the front line and I have a Russian T-90 coming down, that I want to fire a depleted uranium penetrator at it because that's my best chance of penetrating an armor and killing that tank. These are all true statements. The problem is, though, what are the consequences of using this weapon? It wasn't thought out when we first deployed these weapons. We used depleted uranium a lot in the battle for Fallujah. We used them in the Gulf War, and we ended up dumping thousands of tons of this stuff throughout Iraq. And if you take a look at the medical consequences of this to the Iraqi people that live in Basra, Fallujah today, the documented instances of birth defects amongst the Iraqi children. Suddenly, if you're a Marine or a warrior who says that I'm here on earth to defend the innocent, that's why I exist. I'm here to defeat evil, to defend the innocent. And I'm using a weapon system that condemns the innocent to centuries of horror, then I can't support that weapon. Depleted uranium is an insupportable weapon. You can't support it. It should never be used. It's a poison. It's a toxin. And when it's used it's in the soil, it's there forever. It's in the dust that they breathe. Go to Kosovo, the high rates of cancer that exist in Kosovo because of the tons of depleted uranium that NATO used there, what we're doing to the Iraqi children. And so now the West wants to give this to the Ukrainians so they can poison the soil of Ukraine and Russia. It's inexcusable. It's unforgivable. It's inhumane, and it's a war crime. It's literally a war crime because we know what the consequences are. We are deliberately taking an action that will have consequences for a civilian population for decades to come, hundreds of years to come. It's inexcusable. And if you're somebody in a country that's providing this, like every American listening to this, call your congressman, call your senator, leave a message to the Biden administration. No to depleted uranium. Not only giving it to the Ukrainians, we need to get it out of our arsenal. We need to get rid of depleted uranium. The Russians have already done that. God bless the Russians for having the foresight to understand that continued use of depleted uranium is condemning the very people that militaries are supposed to protect. I'd like to believe that America has that kind of moral compass. Sadly, we don't.